Right, everybody. Welcome to High Street Conversations for the 30th of April. Today we're talking about NCP and what it can tell us about the post-COVID High Street. So, the news, which I have to admit took me completely by surprise. A month and a half ago, it was announced that NCP had entered administration. And that immediately puts obviously a number of jobs at risk. So I've heard some reports say 700, some reports say 1,000. But also for us here, it's the challenge of parking capacity, which is immediately put at risk in towns and city centres across the UK. Because NCP is reportedly out of cash and has a challenge in terms of paying its creditors. PricewaterhouseCoopers is taking on the role of administrators. So the question then becomes is how big, how far spread is the problem going to be from members across the UK? And by all accounts, it's going to be quite significant because NCP is the UK's biggest car park operator, which means we think we're going to have a lot of members who are going to see some quite significant and immediate pressures if their NCP car parks are closing. Now, I say if because this is an ongoing discussion. It's happening live, it's happening right now, and every day we are hearing news of certain sites which are being salvaged and certain sites which are being closed permanently. Take Leicester, for example, where I think they've got a number of NCP car parks, all of which had closed. However, Leicester City Council confirming just a couple of days ago that two of the sites will be saved thanks to Euro car parks. So that's going to bring a number of car parking spaces back into use, which is good. Unfortunately, it's just not the case everywhere. We already know there are some sites which are closing permanently, and the immediate loss of this parking capacity is going to hit businesses and users in different ways. So you think about the times of the day in which different businesses might rely on motorists, or you think about the types of users of town centres who might rely on cars for accessibility, such as disabled people and the elderly who might not necessarily use public transport, or those people travelling in from rural areas who might not have the option of public transport. So all of these things are going to come into play when we understand who is going to be hit where. Now, what I found really interesting is a number of reports detailing some of the challenges for NCP. And the thing that struck me is just how much this resonates with other businesses on the high street. Firstly, in terms of the business model and the use of private equity in terms of its ownership, for example. Reportedly, also a challenge for some of the major retailers which had private equity at the head of their organizations, where there were long-term challenges in terms of decision making. Also, understanding just how much consumer behavior has changed, just how much high streets have changed, especially following the pandemic, and how that has influenced car parks. Things like, as we know as well, working from home and how that might have influenced the use of car parks. So, one of the things we should be asking is are some of the challenges that we've seen for NCP universal across the parking industry? You might even go further than that, and that's if they're universal for a lot of businesses across town centres. And if working from home does form part of the picture in terms of some of these challenges, should we be concerned about some of the other challenges we have right now when it comes to the energy market? This morning, Brent crude going as high as $126 a barrel before falling back a little bit. Clearly an ongoing issue. And I have heard talks between employers and employees about extending work from home for the short term to get through this. How does that impact long-term behavior? What does that mean for businesses, not just our parking operators? So there's lots to get into here. there's lots which I think this tells us about the broader high street. So I think we're going to have a good conversation. I think we're going to start in terms of the here and now and how the closure of NCP car parks is impacting businesses on the high street. And for that, we're going to bring in our friends from Coventry, including Coventry Bid and the Belgrade Theatre. I then want to talk about some of the broader challenges for the parking industry and how it's impacted by the evolution of towns and city centres, especially post-COVID, and especially some of the other issues which the parking industry may have, which I think we would all find quite familiar on this call. For that, we'll hear from the British Parking Association. And then finally, I want to open up as well to the broader group to ask, how do we need to respond? Is this about replacing parking capacity like for like, where maybe the challenges haven't been about the demand for that parking space? Is it about looking at how we do something different with some of the space that's been left by NCP and using it for other activities? I'd be keen to hear all thoughts. So, that being said, can I bring in Joanne at Coventry Bridge? Joanne, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Morning, all. So I think I'm joined I've got Nick from Telegraph Hotel. We've got Chris Hartley representing the Belgrade Theatre, and also I'm not sure if I've got somebody on from JD Gyms as well. So our NC car park is a multi-story, so it's a huge car park in an area that really is there is no other council or other privately owned very close. It's situated where we have two hotels with no car parking. What it worked for a large theatre and an eating area. So, and with a gym and everything else. So for us, it's a huge impact that other car parks are too far away. People would not necessarily feel safe when the theatre finishes at 11 o'clock at night to be walking through different areas of the city. Let's say they were on their own or different stuff. We've got people coming to use gyms very late at night. Um, but also with the hotels, for me, it's people are just not going to stay at the hotels because there's no car parking facilities. And I think Nick could say a little bit more on the amount of numbers that are coming to their hotel at the Telegraph. Um, we are having conversations that are ongoing, I think either this week or next week with the local authority. But again, we're not really getting a lot out of the local authority on it. We're asking other private owned car parks to stand up. But for us, it's a huge, absolutely huge impact on a lot of businesses. And I also know, is there anybody on from JD? If they're not, I can say, but they've done a fine. Basically invested over £250,000 literally just to soundproof their flooring for the Premier Hotel so there's no noise. And now if they've got nowhere to park, they've paid all that money out and actually they're not going to get the footfall um, from it. So yeah, and we have Severn Trent, one of the biggest employers in Coventry that actually used NCP car park for their staff. And again, nowhere for their staff now to park. But also, that car park has not been closed correctly. So they've ripped everything out, but they haven't sealed it up. They've stopped the lifts from working. So I've also, on the other level, under safety, I've got people parking in that car park with no lighting, no lifts, no CCTV. Um, and for me, that's a huge risk. So for me, as the closing down, that's something else that we need to look at. If they're doing this, they need to make sure they're securing their car park safely, because there could be quite a large incident, or it be taken over by rough sleepers or drug users, and that we don't want in our city centres or areas. So that's just a brief overhaul from me. So I think it'd be really good to hear from Nick and Chris, and if anyone's on from JD Gyms,
Yeah.
on the financial and number impact to their businesses within our city, if that's okay.
Shall I jump in, folks?
Yeah, go for it, Chris.
Hi, my name's Chris Hartley. I have a business, consultancy business, and more on the event management and venue management side. But I can. One of my clients is the Belgrade Theatre. I've been working for a couple of years, and they've asked me to coordinate our response and look at the challenges and the opportunities based on the closure. Just to give you a bit of data and stats on the theatre, we have two auditoriums, and our capacity for our largest auditorium is just shy of 900 people. We're an unusual theatre because we not only do we host um, external productions, we also curate a lot of our own content, and very much geared and focused to supporting the local community, diverse communities, folks that are less privileged than us, getting them involved in the arts and culture and theatre. We attract, in terms of theatre attendees, and as Joe has mentioned, a lot of our productions finish late at night, and so from a car parking requirement, 11 p.m. is a must for our attendees, and none of the other car parks currently stay open till 11, although we're trying to engage with them to see if that can happen. But we attract, in terms of theatre goers, just shy of 80,000 theatre goers a year. And we also have a growing events, conference and meetings business, which probably attracts another 10 to 15,000 visitors. And then, like other theatres, a strong catering and food and beverage offering. Unusually, and I think you'll know the stats better than I think UK benchmark in terms of people travelling to theatres by cars is 42%. In the case of the Belgrade Theatre, 64% of our audiences travel by car, and only 12% use public transport versus, I think, a UK benchmark of about 35%. Nearly 60% of our tickets are issued to audiences outside of Coventry, which reinforces, like the other stats I've just shared with you, the need for a car park. And we estimate the ripple effect of visitors attending the theatre on the local economy is about £2.5 million. So the theatre and the Belgrade Plaza car park the Belgrade Plaza car park is crucial to our offering, and it is literally 2 minutes walk once you leave the NCP Belgrade Plaza to the main entrance of our theatre. So it's an integral part of our offering. I guess in terms of the work I'm doing to coordinate our response to the car park, a little bit like you said, OJ, we realised, obviously we'd read in the news about the challenges of the NCP and the closure, but on the Tuesday before it closed on the Thursday was the first notification that we had it was closed by little notes pinned to the automated access systems at the car park. So it's not just our visitors and attendees that we have challenges with, it's staffing as well, because obviously, as I've said, as the theatre is open and late productions and then bars and things like that, we have a lot of late night workers engaged with the theatre's activities, which is causing no end of disruption, as you can well imagine, to staffing and staff morale. I've spoken to a number of the other organisations that Joe's mentioned, and we're trying to collaborate in terms of our offering. I've engaged with some of the other car parks that are further away to explore opportunities to open later and earlier, and those conversations are ongoing. And again, as Joe has mentioned, I'll be meeting with the appropriate councillors and people at Coventry City Council, because we really need to understand what their narrative and conversations has been with PricewaterhouseCoopers. All of us and the people that I'm talking to, this is uncharted waters for us. You know, we've never dealt with an insolvency practitioner, but we are absolutely keen to work together and collaborate to put a business case together to see if there's an opportunity for the Belgrade Plaza car park to be taken over by another operator or managed short term by a collective. I'm also particularly keen to see what the P&L is for the Belgrade Plaza car park, because I think that's important. Like you've said, AJ, car parks, like other retailers and high street businesses, are feeling the challenges. I'm really keen to understand what the business case, what the P&L is to support a business case. And I'm also very keen to understand, as I'm a marketeer and a salesman, I'm very keen to understand what relationship and account management was involved with the NCP Belgrade Plaza to engage with the big employers, with the big visitor attractions in the regions, to collaborate on making that car park a car park of choice. It is an asset. It sounds peculiar to say it is a visitor attraction, but I'm doubtful whether there has been any proactive engagement with key communities, key retailers, to make that car park a car park of choice. And that's an integral part of whatever the business case is
So I'll come in on that,
moving forward.
Chris. So what
Okay.
I can say is going back probably about 12 months previous, and I don't know if any others of people have seen this from their car parks, but previously we would have a 24-hour security guard on that car park. But going back 12 months, and that was our way of conversations, they would feed back and all different things. But about 12 months ago, they removed all of their in-person security and put barriers up with a door, a lockable door type of thing. So thinking about it now, that they're probably 12 months or more ago, were hitting huge financial walls,
Right.
and that's where they started removing in-person staff from their car parks. And they became very, very difficult to have conversations with. From my perspective, where we'd always been able to have conversations, there just was never nobody to talk to, or you was just being passed from person to person.
And that leads us to think that they weren't proactive in terms of engaging with
Correct.
potential customers, both
What?
existing and new. And I guess the other thing, and I'll shut up in a minute, I don't want to hijack this call. I'm really keen to learn and understand how, if we can engage with PwC and other organizations that control that asset, to see and have that conversation around what opportunities there are um, moving forward. Because in the limited time it's been closed, and the organizations that I know Joe has been talking to and I've been talking to, there is a business case to be put together to support that car park, in my opinion. So yeah, need a bit of a steer and a guidance on the best way of engaging to see if there is a short and medium and long term solution for the property.
Yeah, I think
Thanks,
that's a really
Chris.
important point, really important point. And on that last note as well, it's important to remember that NCP is a big organization, and its failure doesn't necessarily reflect on a strong business case for individual car parks. And for those individual car parks, the the role of that car park is to support a broader ecosystem. So indeed, the business case for individual car parks within NCP's portfolio could be a really strong one. So absolutely.
Okay, sorry to interrupt, you mentioned earlier that some of the car parks, the NCP assets, have closed permanently and others haven't. Do you have line of sight as to which ones they are and why those decisions were made? Because when you say closed permanently, I imagine repurposing that site as opposed to opening up as a car park. Do you have any line of sight on that?
No, so I'm only going from media reports which have been filtering through, and a lot of it tends to come from local press, which is
Okay.
saying this site is going to be closed. And when I say permanently, it doesn't necessarily mean that there won't be another parking operator or another buyer somewhere down the line who might pick up that car park. But for now, the decision has been to, like Joanne said, pull everything out, keep it closed. Whereas there are some others which are already reopening.
Are there? Okay.
So
Well,
when I say
under new
permanently, I'm not.
management, Ringo and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely, absolutely.
It would be really interesting to find out, as I say, what the journey has been with regards to specifically with the plaza, whether Ringo are engaged with that or others, because we would absolutely, as a collective, help support the business case that helps a future operator make a decision on whether it's a yay or nay that the Belgrade Plaza is a commercially viable proposition. We some of the information that we've started to collate and provide can only support that.
That's really interesting to know. And I think maybe there's some work to be done then after this meeting about just being able to join the dots with the likes of PwC, British Parking Association, maybe even possibly central government as well. So they are aware that this meeting is taking place.
Right. Okay.
And no doubt, just because of the scale of NCP, this will be an issue which is now on their agenda. But I don't know what conversations have taken place as to what to do next.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Is it all right
Fab.
to bring Nick in,
Yeah,
AJ?
absolutely. Nick, come on in.
So I'm Nick. I'm the operations manager at the Telegraph Hotel, and as Chris mentioned, we're a stone's throw from the Belgrade Theatre. So we rely heavily on the Belgrade, or relied heavily on the Belgrade Plaza NCP. It was the car park that we mentioned to our guests to park in. It was 24-hour access. Um, it was able to facilitate guests coming and going at any time of the day. And although West Orchards have changed their opening hours to 10 p.m. during the weekdays, we have seen an effect that doesn't allow some of our guests to leave at 6 o'clock in the morning, so they have to seek alternative parking within the area. Um, Between sort of the 16th of April and the 28th of April, we actually sold just shy of 1,100 bedrooms. Just shy of 640 of those were arrivals, so due to come in during that period, whether the others were staying beforehand. 58% of those arrivals travelled by car, so you're talking around about 370 people, which averages about 31 cars a day. So you can see that we rely heavily on car parking within the area, and that's then not against our conferences. I've actually had a conference decline with us today because of car parking. They don't see it viable for us. Now, they're thinking short term, but hopefully something comes about. Um, Also during that period for the conference that we had about 120 people come as well. So massively the Belgrade Plaza closure has affected us, but we have sort of worked with other areas to discuss the car parks within the customers that we're coming. But with it being 3 minutes walk from us, as you said, security, accessibility with the lifts, it's probably best pointed for us, but unfortunately, we're working with what we've got at this point in time.
Thanks, Nick.
Yeah, Nick, again, that's really useful insight from both Chris and Nick. I think it's so important to understand the local impacts this has on some businesses. And it feels to me like this is going to be hit and miss right across the country. So the fact that you were reliant on the car park and there aren't any others within meaningful walking distance sounds really difficult. And that might be replicated in some places. And for other places, it might be that there's a cluster of car parks, so the closure of one doesn't have the same level of impact. So this is going to be very much about the local dynamics in any area. So I think that's really good insight and understanding the different types of businesses that are impacted as well. If you have a theatre and the theatre finishes late, then people are going to be reliant on the car to get home. You can't escape that. You can't avoid that. So things like early evening to nighttime economy businesses could be really impacted. So
And
yeah,
our
real challenges.
travel, to be truthful, like I say, for the Telegraph as well, they have quite a large bar. They have a rooftop bar in the summer. So people would just come in to drink anyway and different stuff like that. But for me, like you say, we haven't got travel that covers either trains or buses that late at night, and people to the theatre and that are coming quite a long way because they put on a real good offering. So there's no other way of transport for them.
Yeah, yeah, real challenge, real challenge. Um, right, what I want to do is I want to bring in Kelvin, and then we're gonna open things up for a roundtable conversation around all the different aspects to do with the challenges that NCP has thrown in front of us. So, Kelvin, can I bring you in?
You may. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
I'm sharing my
Fabulous. Your screen sharing has worked. So if you go to gallery mode, you should be all good.
right. If I go to gallery mode, how do I do that?
So
Can you see my screen now?
yeah, I can see your screen. The way I normally do it is at the bottom on the right hand side,
Does that work?
right next to there you go, done it.
There you
You
go.
say you're not an expert on Zoom, and yet.
Indeed. Remember this. I, before I start, I was just interested on that conversation, which was really, really interesting. I've put something in the chat there, and clearly, as an association, we wouldn't want to see car parking lots closed around the country in an unsafe way. That's not good for anyone, and certainly not reputation in the parking sector. So, if you are aware of any, do let me know, and we'll do whatever we can to work with whoever to ensure that doesn't happen. I mean, clearly we can't force anyone to do anything, but we can encourage and make all the right noises and encourage people to do all the right things. Certainly, as a sector, we would not want to see car parks left in a situation where they become derelict, unsavoury places and things like that, which is a risk. The other thing I would say before I start is again on the presentation is that I live in a town where a theatre closed and all the cafes around it said, "Now what are we going to do?" So this isn't a kind of unique situation, you know. And I would ask you to think about, and we'll touch on this, that car parking is just another form of retail. And what they're selling is parking spaces versus beds or TVs or whatever, and they need to be viable businesses in their own right. And so, there's some really interesting conversations going on here. And forgive me if I get all the names wrong, but the gentleman from there, Chris from the theatre, that car park may well be viable. But imagine if you look at, say, a BHS or a Debenhams when they went to the wall, there might have been one or two Debenhams stores that were trading their socks off, but the rest of them weren't. And that's the challenge that I think that car parking operators have. They are just another form of retail. And I think we need to see them in that context. They may well support a local economy, but so does the theatre support the cafe economy. This is a kind of symbiotic relationship here. We're all supporting each other. So just to kind of in that context, and I just had a little quick canter through how long we've been facing the challenge of regenerating the high street, and what does that mean, and what's parking's role in this. And I remember going back to 2010 when Dame Mary, I think she is now, spoke about parking league tables. Well, what were they supposed to measure? They never actually materialized, but what were they supposed to measure? The volume, the pricing, the quality, who knows? One of the things I've been saying for a very long time is there's no such thing as a free parking space. Someone's paying for it somewhere. It's typically taxpayers, business rate payers, landowners, service users. If it's free at the point of use, that's fine. But let's be honest about who's paying for this. The NHS is free at the point of use, but we all pay billions in tax to make it happen. So here's the challenge: promoting high streets, effective parking management, motorist choices, new technology, aging car parks. And let's face it, the NCP stock, which we're talking about, and I can't get into the detail of NCP scenario because it's going through an administration process, and it remains a member of the BPA. But their portfolio of buildings is generally quite old. Many of those were built in the 60s and 70s, probably the 80s. So that's a 50-year-old building. let's understand why people come to park. They don't park to park. They're not coming in to simply park. They come to shop, to work, to learn, to rest, to play, to do all those things, go to the theatre, have a drink, do whatever, visit the coffee bar. So parking is a means to an end, not an end in itself, and it has to work financially. And we don't regulate parking for the sake of it. We regulate parking, or rather, I say we, parking is regulated to manage demand, ration conflicts, ensure spaces turnover, improve accessibility, promoting road safety, all of those reasons why parking is managed. We are still facing a scenario, this is 10 years old, but it's still true, when ministers like Brandon Lewis say CCTV spy cars are a recent innovation from a socialist authority, etc., 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 and describes surveillance of car parking as Stasi surveillance. That's not helpful. It really isn't helpful. And as a sector, we are still facing the brunt of significant misuse and abuse of our buildings and, more importantly, our people. Ironically, the biggest user of CCTV is the government and surveillance. But let's not dwell on that point. But that political rhetoric creates a mantra of distrust, mistrust, and some would say hatred towards people managing parking. This is good. This is bad. I accept that. And we're working hard with people to make car parking more and more accessible. This is ugly. And it happens on a weekly basis, almost. So, what are we trying to do with our high streets? What are we actually trying to do? The image on the left, nostalgic view of the high street in its heyday. Are we trying to create the image on the right? Is that feasible? Can we actually get there? Is that dreamland? Are we worried about this? The image on the left is clearly something nobody wants to see. The image on the right, maybe. But can we actually get there? What does that actually mean? There's not a car in sight here. I did some research, which I touched on a little bit with OJ a while ago, and I looked at the rise of car ownership over the last 30 years, and that's in the blue line on the left. And high street footfall is in the orange line. And I looked at internet banking and footfall over the same period. And those two graphs are remarkably similar. And whilst parking might be seen as the problem, you could equally say that internet banking is the problem. And what I would suggest is that we need to look at this thing holistically. It's not just about the parking. What we're facing is a situation where car ownership has given people choice. When I started my career out 50 odd years ago now, there were 10 million cars on the road. Today, there's 38 million. And car ownership did one very significant thing for town centres. My mum walked to town. She went to the local town. That's all she could do. We never had a car. Car ownership gave people choice. They could go to different towns. They could explore. And so all of a sudden, car ownership has given people choice, and town centres need to compete with each other, let alone between retailers. And that's a phenomenon that car ownership has created, that town centres need to compete with each other. And then mobility has enabled retail to operate on the edge of town or out of town. That would never have happened without the motor car. So I think we have to understand that dynamic too. So car ownership rose steadily until the 2000s, and then it started to level off. The big issue now is transition from ICE vehicles, petrol, diesel, to EV. Not so much masses of car growth is slowing down significantly. And interestingly, a DVLA statistic, which is quite interesting, is the number of people applying for driving licenses now has flatlined for the last 5 years. Whereas traditionally it was going up and up and up all the time. So the number of drivers coming into the market is leveling off. So are we at peak car, as we transport professionals call it? Have we actually got there now? And it's more about how we fuel them rather than how many we have. But car ownership didn't precipitate high street footfall. Car ownership gave people choice and expanded competition, and it may well have accelerated a footfall decline, but it didn't cause it. Internet banking, on the other hand, when people's cash started to be replaced by digital money, when our pensions were paid into the bank directly, when our salaries were paid into the bank directly, when we pay for things directly without needing cash, means that the reason to go to the town has gone. We used to go to the bank. We used to go to the post office to collect our pensions. We used to go to the bank to cash in our paycheck and get our money. And while we were there, we would do our rest of our shopping. But we don't need to go anymore. And because we don't need to go anymore, we don't go. And then the internet accelerates. And we can effectively do everything we want to do without leaving the house anymore. We can have our groceries delivered. We can watch TV and movies 24/7, streaming. We can pay for it all from our smartphone. Why do I need to go downtown? Whether I've got a car or not. What's parking got to do with it? I don't need to go. The only reason I go to town today is to go to the gym or to meet my friend for a coffee or to go walk about in the park. I can't remember the last time I went to town to go shopping. And I'm not unique by any stretch of the imagination. That's the challenge we face, reinventing our towns. Here's another interesting thing, because the premise of this session was, what did COVID do? If I told you that the place on the left got 100% rate relief during COVID and the place on the right got nothing, would you be surprised? No car park operator was given any rate relief whatsoever during the whole 3 or 4 years of COVID. They were expected to open their premises and provide free parking for NHS staff, social care workers, and everyone who was supporting the economy and our health and well-being. Hospital car parking was made free overnight, regardless of how that car park was provided and funded, whether it was provided by the private sector or the hospital. And parking operators, which I said at the beginning of this, are simply retailing parking spaces as opposed to coffee or TVs, took a massive financial hit because they had no footfall other than that which they were forced not to charge for. That's the reality of what those car parks were like, but with no revenue coming in. Just picking up the premise of this question. I can't answer that question. I'm not allowed to. But what I can tell you is that most of the UK parking operators in this country, the big ones, the NCPs, the Q Parks, the Sabas of the world, are now part of large multinational private equity funds. That's a fact, as are probably most of the big retailers, except barring the likes of John Lewis and those kinds of things. And as I said to OJ, the macroeconomics of that entire business are what they're interested in. The microeconomics of the car park down the road from you is what you're interested in. And they're not the same thing. They are very definitely not the same thing. And you've given some examples today of where a building which might be 50, 60 years old, that's been over leveraged. Remember, when NCP was formed, it was a private company belonging to two individuals, and it was a real estate company primarily. They had 600-700 car parks around the country. And that asset, when it was transferred and they sold out, that business was asset stripped, became a brand, which was very few of the car parks owned by NCP. Sorry, very, very few of the car parks operated by NCP are now owned by NCP. It's a brand, and they're renting space like everybody else. And the business that underpins those spaces, underpins those buildings, is a private equity firm somewhere else on the planet. It's something we just have to understand. It's the real politic of the situation. So what do NCP's trouble tell us about post-COVID high street? Venture capitalism, multinational corporations tend to be financial vehicles, not modes of transport. What does car ownership tell us about the high street? Car ownership gave people choice of which high street to go to. What does the internet banking tell us about high street? Internet banking took away the reason to go to the high street in the first place. So tell me what you want, what you really, really want. How are we going to get there? That's me.
Brilliant. Thanks a lot, Calvin. So much to think about there. I guess one thing I reflect on, and it absolutely sort of focuses in on the point of to whether this is anything to do with demand. And there will be questions around the demand for NCPs, but that decision to not provide car parks with rate relief during the height of COVID, when everything was on lockdown and there was very little to no revenue coming in. And I just wonder how critical that decision was, because I look back on some of the recent NCP stories. You put into Google NCP and private equity, and certainly there was a big change in ownership in 2021 when NCP started to hit some major financial challenges. And no doubt at the height of the pandemic, when NCP needed financial support, that wasn't forthcoming from the government. And maybe that then precipitates what happens next. And this maybe not be down to demand. As is Chris's point, there is a business case there for that car park to remain in Coventry city centre, because this isn't necessarily about just demand. This is about a business not getting the support it needed during the pandemic when others did, because maybe we don't view it as an important part of the ecosystem like other businesses. So I throw that out there. It's probably not something any of us can really answer, but I do think it's something worth considering. And for me, it probably underlines Chris's point that some of these car parks, there is probably a business case to save them and protect them, because of what they mean to surrounding businesses and the fact that there's demand probably there to make a viable business of them. Joanne, can I bring you back in?
Yeah, just I thought it was a really good presentation. Thanks, Calvin. So And I totally agree with you. So, with our city centre, with the local authority side, as you know, Coventry City are just going up to the Premier League. With having something going on with the parade and everything else. And the local authority then contacted the privately owned car parks within the city centre to ask them, would they give free car parking on that day? Now, if there's any day of the year to ask for free car parking, it's not going to be one when you're expecting 300,000 into your city. It's going to be when people are a bit lower on cash at Christmas because they're buying presents for late night shopping. So again, I think there's some learning from local authorities and other people to understand they are a business. They've got bills to pay just the same as everyone else. And I do think your presentation showed that really clearly. But as well, maybe local government need to have a real good look at it, because for me, it was not the time to be asking private owned landowners to be giving up on their car parks being full all day long over that Pacific weekend. You want them to make the revenue, because there's other times in the city, a lot, when you're not going to be bringing that money in.
I think that's absolutely right. I think for me, I often wonder why parking's free at Christmas. Someone somewhere is paying for it. And I agree entirely with your notion. But if you look back at the situation where, parking is just another form of retail, which retailer would give away their product at the time of the busiest trading time of the year? The answer is very few. They may do sales after Christmas or sales in the summer when things are quiet to drive business, and parking operators probably do the same. you know. But at peak trading times, they maximize the revenue, because that's what you'd expect any good retail business to do. And to use phrases that have been used elsewhere in this conversation, parking is part of the ecosystem. It's not it's not kind of a service provider that sits there for the goodwill. It's actually part of the ecosystem. Now, local authorities may be in a slightly different position because their role is to underpin the social cohesion of the environment that they have a geographical jurisdiction for, and that may well be providing free parking, and they may well take a view that they'll fund that out of council tax or rates or whatever. But let's be honest, that free parking is therefore being paid for by the council taxpayers, because it costs money to run. It's not free, and so that's a business decision that the local authority has to make. Can it afford to give away its parking? If as part of that community cohesion, the local authority goes along to the community, to the businesses in that community and say, hey, look, for the benefit of the town, can we all do this? And they do it in partnership, or that's the town working together, and that's a good thing.
But you wouldn't want to do it when you know you're going to maximize on a day that you're going to maximize your sales. That probably actually that day, what I'm talking about, will probably blow every car park out the sun for the next 5 years, let's say. You're just not going to. Why
No,
would you
no,
ask
I
that
understand.
question?
And for me, as a transport engineer planner, of many many years, in a situation where I've got a big event going on in town, whatever it is, I'd be wanting to keep vehicles out of town, and I'd be wanting to find other ways of getting people into town. Because the most important thing about the town is the people in it, not filling it up with parked cars and all of those things. And in a completely different context, I was speaking some years ago to a forum about historic towns. The Lyme Regis of the world, and places like that, where they're very keen on tourism, massively keen on tourism, and talking about parking and how important parking was, and car parks getting bigger and bigger and bigger and destroying the very heritage that they actually want people to come and see, because there's now acres and acres and acres of parking. And that's not what they wanted, really. What they wanted was footfall. And so, what retailers want is footfall. What the theatre people want is footfall. They don't want lots of cars. They just want lots of people. How do you get lots of people into the high street? How do you get lots of people into the theatre? Doesn't matter how they get there, does it? And that's the
Um,
challenge.
Joanne, is that a legacy hand?
Yeah,
No,
sorry, it's because I don't use it. Normally just drops on Teams. Let me have a look out lower
No,
hand.
it's
There
fine.
we
can
Chris,
I
go.
jump
Thank
in
you.
and add some? Can I jump in and add some positivity, please?
yeah, go for it, Simon. And then
So,
Simon, after you, I'll bring Chris in as well, because Chris, I see your
uh,
hand's gone up. So
apologies, I
go
didn't
for it,
put my
Simon.
hand up. So I'm a centre director of a large shopping centre in Watford. I chair the Watford bid, and I work for Savills. I've managed shopping centres and car parks around the southeast for 20 something years, probably longer than I care to remember. Quick point on administration processes. It's been said car parks are a business, the same as any other retail business. Businesses, retailers go into administration all the time. You just don't know about it because it's just not relevant to people's day-to-day lives. 100% agree with the point that NCP is a huge business, and therefore its demise is almost certainly not specific to. Sorry, its demise is almost certainly not generic across all of the car parks. It will be some car parks that are failing. 100% car COVID and not getting business rates relief, the insane way we do business rates valuations, and how it takes probably, I think the last one I did, 3 years to challenge a business rate and get £1.6 million. Bearing in mind this is 4 car parks, so we're not talking about hundreds. Get the 1.6 million back for 4 car parks that I manage is absolutely insane. The ad to go to the positivity, the admin process, and broad brushstrokes, and I know most of people will know this, but I'll say it anyway. The administrators will try and sell the business as a whole. They won't be able to do that because of the amount of debt associated with the business. And then they will package it up into pockets, and individual, particularly car park operators or landlords, will buy chunks of car parks until you get down to the stage where the last few that are struggling, and then if they own the car park, which, as someone has said, they might not own the car park, in which case it will revert back to the landlord. And it's not that difficult to find an operator for a car park. In most cases, I'm not saying in all, it will be packaged off for land. There's a car park near to us. The property owner bought it an absolute steal. It wasn't making any money. They brought it as an absolute steal. They are going to demolish it and redevelop it. But in the meantime, they're going to operate as a car park, even if it's just to cover the costs of the land that they've just bought. In nearly all cases, and again, it's been said that car parks are part of the infrastructure. It is a business. There is money to be made. It might not be a huge amount of money, but there is money to be made. And assuming that there is a customer base like near to a theatre, like near to a high street, assuming there's a customer base, someone will do something with it. The only negativity I would add to that is it may take longer than you'd want it to.
Yeah, that I feel like I absolutely agree with that. Where individual car parks are viable, they'll probably be saved. They'll probably come back into use again, where that business case is there.
I would chuck one
Um,
last. High streets are doing brilliantly, by the way, absolutely brilliantly. There is growth across nearly all of the country. There's pockets of issues, but broadly speaking, high streets are on a massive resurgence, and I find it. I couldn't get off this call without saying so.
Good, no, good. I like that. I like that. I'm too much,
That's good to
too
hear.
often the prophet of
That's good to
doom.
hear. And I think also, sorry to interrupt, AJ, but I think what you've just heard there is probably true. I mean, I can't say for fact because I don't know exactly what's going on with NCP and Bryce Waterhouse. Did somebody say? Um, but it is true that the ownership of the parking stock that they have will be fragmented. Um, it will be in various forms, but there are lots of other parking operators out there, and You know, I don't know a lot about administration in terms of closing down businesses, but what was described just now clearly is what happens generally. You know, if they can't sell it as a whole, they break it up and sell it in bits. And individual operators will come along and pick off individual opportunities that they see where there are viable propositions and do something with them. And that will depend on the nature of the surroundings, you know, and we've seen some good examples here where they're surrounded by, you know, swimming pools, leisure centres, theatres, and things which are driving footfall, hotels, whatever. That's good news. They may well be viable in their own right, but not as part of a big multinational investment vehicle. And so that opportunity is there. It also depends on the age of the asset and how much time and energy has got to be spent in refurbishing it and bringing it up to a modern standard, um, and so on. That's not to say that the NCP car parks out there are not up to a modern standard. I don't know, but the quality of those car parks will vary across the country. That's a fact. And you know, the structural integrity of those buildings will vary across the country. Every one of them will be safe, but some of them will be in a better position than others. And you know, there are other challenges with car park operations today, such as the transition to EV, and you know that's causing a massive infrastructure change in car parks in terms of not only providing the energy supply, because people expect to be able to charge their car in town while they're doing business, ready to head off back home again or wherever they're going, and including all infrastructure into car parks is expensive. Someone's got to pay for that. Um, and yet home charging seems to be the big deal. And so there's that juxtaposition as well of the fact that, you know, home charging is cheaper. People with driveways are charging at home. As batteries get better, you know, we're seeing vehicles now with 300, 400 and 500 mile ranges. So if you've got 300, 400 mile ranges, that's once a month charging probably, as opposed to the kind of 7 kilowatt trickle charger. You know, there's a whole bunch of things going on here that are impacting the viability of a parking lot and what else you need to do to make it attractive and so on. Some of the bigger operators now, the Q Parks and the Vinci Parks of the world, and the APCOs are converting their city centre car parks into mobility hubs where they become locations for deliveries, for e-bikes, for cargo bikes, for all kinds of things going on. They're not just, so they're being repurposed. They're not just car parks anymore. So there's a whole transition going on here. But I'd be very surprised if the entire parking stock of NCP were to be closed overnight and sold off as real estate and converted to houses, for example. Some of it might. Some of it will come back as car parking. Some of it will be refurbished. Some of it will carry on as it is now with a new operator. And all of that will happen across the country. I'll be very surprised. Personal view, because I don't know as an association. I think as an association, we can be part of the conversation with um, um, administrators and other potential operators. But
Yeah, well, and I want to bring Chris back in, but Chris, it sounds to me, based on what both Simon and Calvin have said, that there is certainly hope um, that the car park can be rescued because it's my understanding as well that those that are proved to be viable will probably survive as a car park. And Chris, just before I bring it back in, question for you, Calvin. So, do you think it would be possible to help Coventry Bid find the necessary contacts it might need to start a conversation about the future of the car park in Coventry city centre?
we can certainly try.
Yeah, cool. Well, I'll make sure we share contact details in after the meeting so you're able to have a conversation with them. Chris, going to bring you in?
Is that me, OJ, or
Oh, sorry, no, Chris Hartley at
sorry?
Belgrade, and then I'll bring you in. Oh no, he's still on mute. Go on then, Christian, after you.
Yeah, so question to Calvin and Simon as well, I guess. I just wondering, obviously, I assume that pre-COVID, a fair chunk of the car parking or multi-story trade at least was presumably based on people taking out monthly plans or weekly plans, something like that. Um, and now that we're in a situation where probably most people would only come into the office maybe 2 days or 3 days a week, they might switch to alternative form of car parking. Do you have any numbers or insights on how that has affected the industry?
I don't have any detail on it, but it's certainly something that I'd be surprised if it wasn't happening. We've seen the situation in the rail sector, haven't we, where people have moved away from season tickets to multi-trip tickets and those kinds of things. Because that's the nature of work. People are now spending, and this is a personal view rather than an association view, but people are now working 2, 3 days at home. Our entire organisation is 2 days in the office and 3 days at home or at the office, your choice. And lots and lots of other businesses are doing the same thing. So yes, has it had an impact on season ticket demand? I'd be very surprised if it hadn't. With more casual use. So yeah, it must, and therefore the certainty of revenue has gone. I think, if you're buying a monthly season ticket or you're buying an annual season ticket to use in a car park, and certainly in the days when I was an operator 20 odd years ago, a significant amount of my revenue in the City of London came from annual season tickets and monthly season tickets, and it gave me some kind of certainty as to how I can invest and what I can do to upgrade. If I'm relying entirely on daily trade, I've not really got any idea whatsoever until I've got a couple of years behind me to start spotting trends as to how things might happen.
You're spot on. So I mostly manage shopping centres and shopping centre car parks. Over the last few years, landlords have had to invest in ANPR systems, which then unlocks the opportunity to do pay-as-you-go parking as opposed to fixed season tickets. It's riskier for landlords because there's no guaranteed income, but the net position over the last 3 years in, I'd probably say 10 car parks that I've got direct data for, is growth in what would have been the equivalent of season tickets because the customer then has that flexibility. So short-term pain, long-term gain.
Yeah, it's Christian, really good question. And Kelvin, in your presentation, you talked about internet banking, and you could absolutely apply that to almost any form of technology at the moment. Not least, Microsoft Teams, Zoom, and how it's changed the way we work, and how you might find people not necessarily going into town in the same volume on, say, Mondays and Fridays, which might influence whether somebody gets a season ticket, whether monthly or annual or not. That is a major change, and that is where the question of demand comes back into it. People are still using town, but just in different ways, in different times of the weeks.
That's absolutely right. And the ticketing model, if it's a funding, and let's remember about 90%, surprisingly, about 96% when the RAC Foundation were the last people to test it in any meaningful way. Something like 95 or 96% of all parking in the UK is free. And the 4% that gets paid for is expensive, some might say, but most of it is free parking, time limited. If you think about what happens in out of town retail, edge of town retail, most of that is free parking. It's just time limited one way or another, to ensure turnover. Sure, in town centre car parks, in city centre car parks, people are paying daily rates, hourly rates, those kinds of things. But the vast majority of parking is free, at the point of use anyway. But ticketing models for different kinds of use are becoming more obvious now, becoming more relevant now in terms of multi-use carnets rather than season tickets and those kinds of things where people are pricing on an assumption that they'll be in every day of the week. And this must be impacting on all kinds of things. I think of the time when I used to be at the City of London. I'd be there 5 days a week, every week of the year, except when I was on holiday, and I'd nip to the local cafe for lunch. All of that's gone, and thousands of city workers are doing the same thing over and over. So it's transforming everything. And as you say, today's conference, we'd all be sitting in a room somewhere, wouldn't we? And consuming coffee and whatever. And here we are all sitting at home or in an office somewhere. And yeah, travel, trade has all changed.
It has. It's all it changed, and I think yeah, one of the things.
OJ, sorry to
Yeah,
interrupt. Can I jump in? Because
yeah, go for it, Chris.
I've now learned how to take myself off mute, which I'm very proud of myself for. Just firstly, Kelvin, I thought that was an amazing presentation. I was absolutely gobsmacked and didn't know about that there was no relief for car parks. I liken your presentation to a good film, and you watch the credits at the end of it, and you just sit there just thinking. I thought it was amazing. So thank you for that. But I think in terms of going back to working with the appropriate people, whether it's the insolvency practitioner, PwC, or others, I'm just really keen, like I said at the top, we need some help and support on how to navigate that. We know that the freehold is owned by the city council, and I'm not sure who the leaseholder is or others. So, and that might be something Joe has line of sight of, but we need to be engaging with the right people, because I agree with you, Simon, that the high street is seeing an upturn, and also with Coventry, not just the promotion of the football club, but there's a huge amount of regeneration work that has gone on and continues to go on in the city centre. There is a huge level of investment in time and energy with the introduction of a destination management company 3 or 4 years ago that's working hard to position Coventry and the wider region as a destination of choice for both business and event tourism, but also leisure tourism. So there's a whole, excuse my terminology, there is a shitload of stuff that we as a collective can pull together, I think, to support a business case. My big fear is it's who we need to talk to, and Simon, you might be able to steer us here, who we need to talk to get across our appetite to support the business case and come up with the relevant analysis and evidence data, which is obviously very important for any future operator. Because my fear is that it will close and disappear without us being able to have the conversations and the narrative with the right people that might take the thing on. So that's, two hands up there. We need help and guidance and support on that. Some of that might come from our meeting with the city council next week, but I'm just worried that the opportunity will bypass us to get our message across because of our lack of knowledge and experience in dealing with insolvency practitioners and car park management companies and the like.
I can give you a really quick second answer. Your local authority, if they're the freeholder, will probably, I don't know for certain, but will probably have an agent. Lambeth, Smith Hampton, Savills, Jones Lang LaSalle. That's who you need to talk to.
Okay. Thank you.
And if I can come back on that, I mean, clearly, if you know who the freeholder is, start there. But you've certainly given me food for thought as an association, because normally in an association of collectives, we're kind of on the outside looking into a lot of extent, setting and promoting best practice and all of those kinds of things. But actually, we've got a good working relationship, for example, in England with the Department for Communities, which is responsible for town centres and high streets and all of those things. We've got a really good working relationship with them. We clearly have a working relationship with all the other parking operators. So I'm going to go away and see whether there's something we can do to facilitate conversations around the country. And if there are bids, districts, those kinds of things around where you're working collectively to achieve those kinds of things, then let's see if we can join the dots, because it seems to be a good idea. In a past life before I joined the BPA, I worked for a major retail operation at Bluewater. And I was part of the design and build team at Blue Water, and then joined the centre management team. So I was there for 5 years. So I understand how retail works.
And you understand venues because it was an event venue as well, wasn't it? I
Absolutely, and it
remember.
still is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it still is.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I get that, and it's 10 minutes a walk from home. So which
Well,
is
because I've got to duck out, but very rudely. So, but thanks everybody. OJ, if you we're Joe has done a wonderful job without blowing sunshine around. She's done a wonderful job of trying to coordinate affected businesses' response. So I can speak on behalf of Joe. We would absolutely, Calvin and OJ, work hard to put together a business case, bring together the right people to support any future dialogue and conversation. So OJ, thanks for having me. And if you could connect us with the right people and with Kelvin and things like that, and then we can continue the dialogue. And then of course we can also make you aware of how we're progressing with our conversations locally with the city council. But really interesting, and I appreciate you having me on the call and allowing me to ramble on like I do.
No, well, the insight's been fantastic, really, really useful. So what I'll do is I will make sure you're in touch with Kelvin so you can work with the British Parking Association to understand the situation from their end, because there may be key contacts they can bring to the table that might be quite important in this. Absolutely agree. Council's probably the first place to start if they are the freeholder. But what I will also do is I have a feeling that what you guys are going through could be replicated in other areas across the country as well. I think this could be a fairly big issue for a number of town centres. And so, like Kelvin suggests, I think engaging central government through housing communities and local government is going to be critical to make sure that they're aware of the issues. And like Kelvin says, for the national associations to make sure we're joining the dots so that where central government can play a role in supporting certain areas in protecting key car parks where there is a business case.
And
That
if there are other regions that are going through the same journey as us, we're all working in glorious isolation. Happy to have conversations, share our learnings, and learn from others as well, of course.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, totally agree, totally agree. Yeah, thanks a lot, Chris. Really, really useful. Thank you.
No, thanks everybody. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I
Cheers,
certainly think, OJ, there's an opportunity for your association and ours to have a conversation and see what we can do collectively with communities department.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And just quickly before we bring the meeting to a close as well, I just want to hear from others if you've got challenges with NCP closures, whether another parking operator is stepping in, whether there at the moment that there is no pathway forward for the site as a car park. I'd be keen to hear from other areas if you've got similar challenges to what Coventry is currently facing.
Neil's put something in from Bexley in the chat.
Oh, Neil, do you want to come on in?
I was being quiet today. I was just listening with interest. Thankfully, within Bexley, we haven't got that much exposure, and we have got an NCP car park attached to a Premier Inn. I've spoke to the bid in Bexley today, and it is still open. But as I say, we're getting issues. I think it's just being casually left open, but it's been actively managed because I was on the community safety call earlier this week, and the police were mentioning cases of ASB, antisocial behaviour, within the car park, and they didn't have anybody to go to. So that's what I initially joined this call for. But obviously, listening to the presentations, things, as I say, as triggered my interest, and I'm thinking I want to look at the ownership of that NCP car park and talk to bringing partners together. As I say, as a council, we've got our car parks in the town centre. There is a big shopping centre, so it is a question of I'd have to have a discussion with a parking colleague saying, well, is there enough capacity anyway? But with that ASB issue, so that's why I'm just very interested in just being involved in the discussion and then looking at how it can affect. As I say, I just want our car parks to be safe. I'm not hearing people going, "Oh, I can't park my car." Yeah, everybody wants to park for free, but as you quite eloquently put it, Kelvin, somebody has to pay. and whether that's council taxpayers or the retailers or the landowners. So yeah, it's been very interesting discussion, and as I say, I'd just like to be kept involved with the feedback. Something may never come about it, but as I say, if there's an opportunity, then I'm sure our shopping centre owners may be interested because they've got development aspirations and it's around that footprint. So that's the thinking in my head at the moment. But thank you very much for your interest in discussion. Agreed with some points from a local authority, slightly have a different opinion on some other points, but very well put, Kelvin.
Yeah, interesting. So, Catherine Marks, I think, has had to leave the call now, but she made a really interesting point in the chat box as well, saying that for a lot of local authorities, feels like they're at a crossroads in terms of their car parks, just simply because, and Kelvin referenced this at the beginning with NCP, in that some of those car parks would have been built 70s, 80s, decades ago. And what you effectively have is aging stock, which it can cost a lot of money in terms of maintenance. And for parking operators and for councils, whether to retain that aging stock, given the high cost of maintenance, or to make a transition in terms of new development, new regeneration of the space, to turn it into something else. However, then that comes at a big cost for the surrounding ecosystem if you lose that parking capacity without the necessary replacement. I think that's fair. That's a fair challenge. Christian, can I bring you back in?
Yeah, just on the point of issues we're experiencing currently with NCP car parks. So in Belfast city centre is actually quite a number, but there's only one that's been permanently closed, as you put it, OJ. So I assume its location it's south of the city centre. I assume there will be some sort of operator stepping in at some point, but in the meantime, sort of in the previous year or previous years, really, we always had difficulties on that particular car park with drug use. And I sort of what Joanne was saying, it was in the last year or so, it became increasingly difficult to sort of engage with the NCP management around that. And now that it's closed, it's obviously even the, lights are even flashing even more red. So even if Calvin could sort of see if he has any contacts. So this is a Hardcastle Street car park in Belfast. It's quite a big. I think it's an 8-story car park. I mean, it's within the city center. So as I said, I don't expect it will be empty for a very long time. It's just that potentially those few months in between that we are really dreading sort of what's going to happen with it.
I think in answer to that question more generally, and I'm sorry to learn of what you've just described, but sadly there is some antisocial behaviour in car parks, regrettably. I suppose inevitably, really, particularly if they're underused or quiet, dark spaces around. The truth is that most car parks are safe places, but some, are not. Until April, in fact, this month, we operated the Safer Parking Scheme on behalf of Police CPI, which was about managing all of that kind of situation and creating Parkmark and the kind of quality car park operation. We've now handed that back to Police CPI. They took it back over from April the 1st. What I would do right now, if I were you, is contact Police Service in Northern Ireland and speak to them about the antisocial behaviour and the kind of things that are going on in there. You could also contact Police CPI, which is the Crime Prevention Initiatives. If you look on the web for Secure by Design, and Safer Parking is now called rather than Parkmark, and contact my former colleagues who've gone over there now because they were all transferred into there may be some help that they can provide in that environment, and that applies everywhere in the country, across the whole of the United Kingdom. So that they are now operating that scheme. There's about 5,000 car parks in that scheme across the country, and which is around 25% of the entire parking stock. So people said to me, what about the other 75%? And my answer to that was Tesco's is happy with 25%. So, um, but no, that's being facetious. Most car parks are safe places. That's a fact. It is also a fact that the more attractive you make them for the people that you do want in there, the less attractive they are for the people you don't want in there. So, brighter lighting and all of those things to make them safe, non-threatening environments. Thank you, OJ, with the web link there. And but that all takes investment. So in buildings that are 20, 30, 40, 50 years old in some cases. Um, I'm really, really proud of the industry over the last 10, 15 years. If you look at some of the newer buildings coming through from the sector, they're light years ahead in terms of, their quality compared with, the traditional builds of the 60s and 70s, which were, let's face it, they were just, concrete garages for storing vehicles in. Whereas now there is an absolute recognition that car parks are for people, and car parking is somewhere that needs to be bright, light, airy, attractive, easy to use, social places. So yeah, and all the modern ones are.
Thanks a lot, Calvin. And I think what I'm going to do is Jack at Team London Bridge, if you're still on the call, I'm going to bring you in for the final comment about the local NCP in your patch.
Yeah, well, I just put it in there because it's probably a very different experience in central London than other parts of the country. But yeah, just the fact that, I mean, one car park had already closed in London Bridge because of lack of use, and they've made a lot of money on selling that to a developer, and that's going to be built on. The NCP car park is being turned into another building, and there was kind of very little, I suppose, opposition to that. Other than it's right next to a hospital, it was used by people going to the hospital, but very little opposition to that being converted. I believe it's still running as an NCP car park and open. But yeah, and another local car park is being used for Amazon's deliveries, as Kelvin's mentioned, as a consolidation hub. So there's a lot of diversifying use of
Yeah.
those spaces, which is quite interesting because they just don't stack up financially. But we are within the congestion zone, so there's kind of the market is a very different place. But
It's not the drivers there, aren't there?
retail is thriving, so it's not as if it's closing down in any sense of the case. It's kind of building up.
You got a massive railway station there as well, haven't you?
Indeed, yeah.
Massive, yeah. And this is it. It's just thinking about the environment in which we find any particular car park and how it can impact its economic success or otherwise. So in central London, where you have fabulous public transport options, I can absolutely understand why there would be pressure to convert those car parks to something else. You then take into account that in such an area where there is such a demand for different uses, whether it's housing or commercial, etc., that landlords will be keen to convert away from less economically successful uses to something that will pay the bills. So where you have those public transport options, absolutely. And we have to remember as well, Kelvin brought it up in his presentation. Some of the changes we're looking at in terms of the dynamics of our town centres with more space for active travel, pedestrianisation, etc. What impact that could have on the ability of people to drive in, on parking capacity, parking demand, etc. All of these things play a role, and I do think it is really fair to say that in terms of car parking operators as a business model, there is so much which is similar to many other high street businesses. Challenges around leases, around, like we've heard today, business rates, challenges around technology and how that impacts demand, etc., etc., etc. It goes on and on. And yet, because they support accessibility, the loss of a car park can really undermine so many other businesses
Yeah.
around them. And so we really have to take that into account where we do see car parks threatened. So I'm going to leave it there. We're bang on 11:30. Really fascinating debate. Thank you all for your contributions. What I will do, Calvin, I will put you in touch with Coventry Bid, so you can take the conversation on from there, and I will be in touch with the civil servants as well, that have the high streets agenda, so they're aware of some of these challenges because there might be further work that needs to be done nationally.
And we can do the same.
And
I
absolutely,
just posted in the chat as a parting shot. You spoke about pedestrianisation and cycling and walking and all of those things into town centres. We've got a program called Park Active, which was launched during COVID, as it happens, and I'll just put a link to that. That is about maximising the use of edge of town parking and making it easier for people to walk into town or cycle into town, or last minute travel into town, that kind of stuff. So recognising that town centres are being regenerated. So if anyone of your towns wants to get involved in the Park Active program, that would be really helpful. And I'll just put a link in the chat. So
that's brilliant. Thanks a lot, Calvin. Thanks a lot, everybody else. I hope to see you soon. Cheers, guys.